Hi, and welcome to the Assembly Lines podcast. I'm Chris Torrance. In today's episode, I want to show you my new Apple II emulator for the Windows, Mac, and Linux platforms. So let's get started. All right, many of you may be familiar with my Apple II TS emulator. I've been working on it for several years now, and it is web-based. It's written in TypeScript, and it runs on all major browsers and has a full-featured debugger, as well as support for MIDI sound, Mockingbird, and all sorts of different disk formats, including WAS, HDV, 2MG, and DSK images. So this is the emulator here. When it first starts up, it just presents kind of a welcome screen. There is a set of built-in disks, and so if you click on the little thumbnails here, you can see all the different disks that it comes with. And for example, I can just pick one of these and it will download it and then run whatever the program is. And this is great. It works great, and the sound works really well as well. So here, for example, we can boot up Skyfox and listen to what that sounds like. One question that kept coming up, though, is what about a desktop version of this emulator? This is fine if you have a web connection, but some people wanted to run it either offline. And there's also some restrictions. When you run it in a web browser, you don't have the same access to files on your disk. You can actually get around this using the standard web API, but it's a little bit clunky and there's a lot of dialogues that come up asking for permission. So what I've done is I've actually taken my Apple II TS emulator and I've wrapped it as an Electron application. And so this is now available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so if you head over to my ct6502.org webpage, you can actually get to the download page for my new Apple II TS desktop application. So you can see I have installers for Windows, I have an installer for macOS, and then I have two different flavors of installers for Linux. I have one for Debian-based systems, so that would be like Debian or Ubuntu, and then I also have one for RPM, so this would be like Red Hat, CentOS, or those other flavors. So if we click on one of these, it'll actually download the DMG file, for example, for the Mac. And then once I've downloaded that, I can go ahead and I can open it up. And then for the Mac, it's very simple. I just have my Apple II TS.app. I drag it into my applications folder, and then it will install it. And then once it has installed, I can go ahead and I can run it. So for example, I can just bring up my Finder, go to Applications, and there's Apple II TS.app. So let's go ahead and we'll double click on that. And yes, I'm sure I want to open it. It'll only ask you that once. So here's the splash screen for the application. And so you can see that this looks just like the web-based app. So over on the left-hand side, we have the emulator itself. We have the disk drives on the bottom, and then we have a whole bunch of controls over here to control things like the speed of the emulator, the color. On the right-hand side, there is a help area, and so this will have instructions for either the emulator itself or for particular games. It'll actually come up with certain instructions. So for example, if I boot up Total Replay, or actually let's do Aztec. And so you can see as soon as Aztec boots up, I'm now presented with a help screen on the right, which shows all of the keyboard controls for Aztec, which is a very good thing because Aztec is an extremely complicated game. This has also all of the debugging features of my Apple II TS emulator. And so let's actually start the game here. And we'll start with a new game and low difficulty. Okay, and we'll just go down the stairs. And here we are. And let me stop. And so now if I actually wanted to freeze the emulator at a certain point, I can just hit the pause button. And when I do that, it'll actually bring up the debugger. And so you can see here, here is the disassembly code. And so we are currently at instruction 0A00, and I can actually step through all these instructions one by one. I can actually step into a subroutine. I can step out of the current subroutine that we're in, or I can go ahead and just hit play to resume the emulator itself. Over on the right here, we have a stack dump. And so this is a map of where we are in the stack. And so you can see these are all the jump or JSR instructions that are currently on the stack and waiting to be popped off. Over on further on the right, there's a memory map. And so this shows what memory areas are currently being used for what in the emulator, and then which of the soft switches are active. So you can see here, I have the high-res switch active, and so that means that it's actually using high-res graphics here in area 2000 to 3FFF. Down to the lower right, we have a memory map, and so this is actually showing the entire 6502 memory, so all 65,000 instructions, and we can actually just scroll through here. We can actually look at certain areas of memory. We can even change bytes if we want to. And then one cool feature, you can actually switch from different areas of memory. So I can look at, say, main RAM, which is what I'm on right now. I could look at auxiliary RAM if I wanted to. That's actually not used for this game. And then finally, I can look at just the high-res graphics screen map. And when I do that, I actually get a little thumbnail. So if I move over here, over the window, you can see that this is the little guy here. If I click on that, it'll actually highlight what those bytes are over here in the memory map. And I can actually go the other way too, and I can click over here and it'll actually scroll to the appropriate location on the screen itself. And then down on the right, we have the breakpoints. And so I can get and set breakpoints. So for example, if I click the plus button here, there's a variety of different breakpoints that I can set. So I have regular breakpoints. So for example, 0A00, I could just set a new breakpoint there. If it hits that address, it'll actually stop. So let's see if we run again. There we go. So now we hit our breakpoint, and you can see it actually puts a little red marker here in the code. I can actually click over here in the gutter, and it'll set a new breakpoint there as well, or I can clear it. There are other types of breakpoints. So you can do watch points. So you can say, well, when a certain address changes values, and then this is actually really useful for soft switches. So you can say anytime that it actually activates, say, C010, which is the clear the keystrobe soft switch, then I want to go ahead and stop the emulator. And you can see these look a little bit different here, so you can distinguish them. If I run the emulator, let me keep running, and let me just hit a key here, and you can see, okay, so it must have just hit the C010. So if we scroll up a little bit, yes, there it is, store C010. And then the very last breakpoint type are instruction breakpoints. And so you can say, if I hit a branch on not equal instruction, there's only one type of that, so 0 page or whatever. Then go ahead and stop on that instruction. So that's kind of a really quick tour of the debugger. There's a lot more features in there. There's actually, you can go back in time. So I have time travel. So if you wanted to go back, and this typically records every keystroke, although you can actually click the little snapshot button here, and that'll actually take a new screenshot or a new time travel snapshot as you're playing a game. Some other features that are in the emulator, and these are all in the web-based one as well. I'm just kind of showing them all here just for completeness for the desktop application. But for the disk drives, we have 2 hard drive disk drives, and then we have 2 floppy disk drives. And if you click on these, you can see we can download the disk image that's currently loaded in that drive. And we also have a connection to either OneDrive, so this is Microsoft OneDrive, or to Google Drive. And so you can actually save and load disk images to, say, Google Drive. And then finally, we have a connection to the Internet Archive. So if you click on that, you can see you're presented with some shortcuts to different areas of the Internet Archive. You can actually just type in a software title and it'll just search for that. But let's say, for example, we click on this first one and we could click on Muppetville, for example, and it'll load that in the emulator. And then, in fact, you can actually bookmark these to save it. And then if I go back to my main disk catalog here and go over to the favorites, you can see it's now saved that. We also have new releases that we don't actually have these disks stored with the emulator. These are actually going out to the internet and downloading them. So for example, if you wanted to play this new game Glider, you could click on that and it'll go out and load it up. And you can see it actually automatically changed the color to green because this works much better on a green screen monitor. And if you're curious about the different colors that are available, you can click here on the little monitor button. So you can see we can do color with no fringe, which is good for certain games like Ultima or Nox Archaeist. We can get a green screen. We can do an amber screen. And then finally we can turn on various features like scan lines, or we can do phosphor ghosting, so it'll actually leave trails as things move. And then we can also turn on CRT distortion, which slightly bends the edges of the screen. It makes it look like a CRT. Let's see, there's a lot of other features that are available. You can actually print to a kind of a emulated image writer printer, and this will actually produce a PDF. So lots of other features. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's an entire scripting language that's built in, and you could play around with that. It's available for Windows, macOS, and Linux. If you install the Windows version, you might get a dialog the first time you run it that it's an unsafe application that was downloaded from the internet. It is perfectly safe, so you can just go ahead and bypass that dialog. It costs a lot of money to actually get a certificate for Windows, and so that wasn't something that I just was able to do for this first release. Speaking of which, I do have, if you're so inclined, I have a little support button here, and you can actually type in an amount if you feel like supporting me in the emulator. This really is used for paying things like maybe getting certificates for Windows or just paying for the website itself. But there's no obligation to pay for it. You can just download it for free. And then finally, I have some links here, so you can click on this link and it will take you to the back to the one that runs in the browser, or you can go to the GitHub for either the emulator itself or for the desktop application. And these are both open source, so if you find any bugs or issues, feel free to log them, or if you actually want to contribute to the code, feel free to do a pull request on these GitHub repositories. All right, I hope you enjoyed this tour of the new Apple II emulator. I have a link in the show notes for where you can download it for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me that way. And if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.